The night had fallen over the city, and it was colder than anyone could remember in recent years. Snowflakes fell heavily, swirling in the wind like tiny dancers, landing on rooftops, trees, and the streets below. The streets were mostly empty, except for the occasional car whose headlights barely cut through the thick curtain of snow. The wind howled like a lonely wolf, bending the bare branches of the trees and sending icy shivers down anyone who dared to step outside. In the middle of this frozen city walked Malik, a young boy no older than 16, with dark skin that seemed to glisten under the dim streetlights. His clothes were thin and worn, and his shoes had holes through which the snow and slush seeped, chilling his feet to the bone. Despite his hardships, Malik moved forward with determination. Every step he took left deep imprints in the snow, each one a quiet testament to his resilience. Malik had spent the entire day working odd jobs. He had swept streets, carried bags for shopkeepers, and run errands for anyone willing to pay him a few coins. By the end of the day, his body was exhausted, but his mind was always alert. He had learned long ago that the streets were unpredictable, and a boy like him had to be careful. Hunger tugged at his stomach, but he didn't let it slow him down. His mind was focused on one thing: getting home safely. The city at night during such a snowstorm was almost like another world. The buildings, covered in thick layers of snow, looked like frozen castles. The streetlights cast a soft, golden glow, reflecting off the snow in a way that made everything seem magical yet haunting. Shadows stretched long across the sidewalks, and every small sound, the crunch of snow underfoot, the whistle of the wind, or the distant bark of a dog, felt amplified. It was a city transformed, beautiful yet dangerous, serene yet unforgiving. As Malik trudged along the icy sidewalks, he kept his eyes on the ground in front of him, careful not to slip on hidden patches of ice. He hugged his thin jacket tightly around himself, wishing he had a warmer coat or a hat to protect him from the biting cold. Despite all this, his mind wandered to his family and neighbors, many of whom were also struggling through this harsh winter. In his neighborhood, warmth and comfort were rare, and every day was a fight to survive. But Malik had a heart full of courage, the kind that made him face the storm instead of hiding from it. Suddenly, in the distance, his sharp eyes noticed something unusual. Among the snow-covered streets and empty sidewalks, he saw a small shape moving slightly, almost as if it were struggling. It was difficult to make out at first, hidden beneath the heavy snowfall, but something about it pulled at Malik's attention. He slowed his pace and squinted, trying to see clearly through the blizzard. The wind was stronger here, almost cutting through him like icy knives, but he didn't hesitate. His instincts told him that someone needed help. As he got closer, Malik realized it was a young girl lying on the snow-covered ground. She was tiny, and her clothes offered little protection against the freezing temperatures. Her face was pale, lips tinged with blue, and her small body shivered violently with each gust of wind. Her hair was matted with snow, and her eyes were half closed as if she were struggling to stay awake. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. He had seen poverty and suffering before, but seeing someone so young and vulnerable in such a state made his chest ache. Without a second thought, Malik ran toward her, ignoring the snow that threatened to slow him down. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling from the cold as he carefully lifted her into his arms. She felt almost weightless, fragile, like a delicate bird in the storm. He murmured softly to her, trying to wake her gently, whispering words of comfort, though he didn't know if she could hear him. The storm raged on, but Malik's focus was only on her. As he carried her through the blizzard, Malik's mind raced. Where could he take her? There was no one nearby, no houses in sight, only the empty, snow-laden streets. Yet, he didn't stop, didn't hesitate, because he knew time was critical. Each second she stayed in the cold was dangerous. The snow clung to his coat, melting slightly from his body heat, but he barely noticed. His entire being was concentrated on keeping her alive, keeping her warm, and finding shelter before it was too late. Despite the freezing wind cutting across his face, Malik felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. In that moment, the storm and the cold didn't matter. What mattered was saving the small life in his arms. His determination was unshakable, his courage quiet but powerful. The streets were harsh, the night was cruel, but Malik was ready to face it all for her. As the snow fell harder and the night grew darker, Malik pressed on, his feet slipping at times, his arms aching, but his spirit refusing to yield. The city around him seemed silent, almost as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. In the midst of the frozen chaos, a poor black boy carried hope and warmth in his arms, unaware that this single act of courage would change both their lives forever. Malik's heart raced as he held the small figure in his arms, feeling the icy weight of her body against his chest. Every gust of wind that cut across the street seemed sharper than the last, and the snowstorm showed no signs of slowing. The girl's lips were blue, her fingers stiff and rigid from the cold, and each shallow breath she took made Malik's chest tighten with worry. He had never seen someone so vulnerable, so fragile, and yet so alive. Her hair, once a soft shade of brown, was now plastered to her face, frozen with snow, and tiny flakes clung to her eyelashes. Malik's mind raced, he had to do something fast, or the night could take her from him forever. He scanned the streets desperately, searching for any sign of life, any hint of a safe place. Most buildings were shuttered for the night, their lights darkened, and the few people who dared to walk in the storm hurried past, pulling their coats tighter and ignoring the suffering around them. It seemed like the city had forgotten her, forgotten all of them who struggled against its cold and unforgiving nights. But Malik refused to forget. He refused to leave her there. In a moment of quick thinking, he noticed a small, abandoned shop with a broken sign swinging in the wind. The door was cracked just enough to slip through, and inside, though dark and dusty, it offered shelter from the biting snow. Malik hurried forward, feeling the sharp sting of snow melting into his thin jacket, and placed the girl carefully on the floor, brushing off the icy snow clinging to her clothes. She whimpered softly, barely making a sound, and Malik could see that she was slowly slipping between consciousness and cold-induced sleep. Malik pulled off his own scarf and wrapped it around her trembling body. It was thin and worn, but it was all he had. Then he realized her shoes were soaked through and completely inadequate for the freezing ground. Gently, he removed them, rubbing her feet with his hands, trying to warm them with whatever heat his own body could offer. Each movement he made was careful, precise, almost reverent, as if touching her too roughly could break her entirely. She was so small, so fragile, and yet Malik felt a strange sense of connection, as though fate had placed them together in this storm. He remembered the small loaf of bread he had bought earlier in the day, enough to keep him from going hungry for a few hours. Malik tore pieces off and offered them to her, hoping she could eat. At first, she didn't respond, her teeth chattering too violently to chew. But after a few minutes, she managed to take a small bite, and Malik encouraged her gently, murmuring, "It's okay, you're safe now, just eat slowly." For the first time since he had found her, she looked up at him with tired, wide eyes, the blue of her lips slowly giving way to a pale pink as the warmth of his body began to seep into hers. Malik felt a mix of relief and urgency. Relief that she was still alive, that she had taken a few bites of bread and seemed to respond to his care. Urgency because he knew that being in that abandoned shop was only a temporary solution. She needed proper care, a real safe place, and maybe even a doctor if the cold had affected her too deeply. He thought about the people he knew, neighbors and shopkeepers, but the night was late, and many would not answer their doors. Yet Malik refused to give up. He had to find someone, anyone, who could help. While he considered his next move, he looked at her closely for the first time. She looked no older than 12 or 13, her features delicate, almost ethereal. Something about her seemed unusual, almost out of place in the grim reality of the city streets. Her clothing, though torn and wet, was of a finer material than Malik had seen on most children in his neighborhood. He didn't know it yet, but these small details would later reveal the extraordinary truth about who she really was. For now, she was simply a helpless child in need of warmth and protection, and Malik knew he had been chosen, in some mysterious way, to be her protector tonight. Time passed slowly as the snow continued to fall outside, piling against the windows and door. Malik kept talking to her, telling her stories of the streets, of his small victories during the day, of life as he knew it. His voice, soft and calm, seemed to soothe her. Each word, each whisper, brought a little more life back into her tired eyes. And though she was unconscious at times, she stirred whenever he spoke, as if his presence alone was keeping her tethered to the world. By the time Malik realized he had to leave the shop and find real help, he had formed a silent promise to the girl: he would not abandon her. No matter what it took, no matter how cold or dark the night became, he would keep her safe. And as he lifted her gently into his arms once more, stepping back into the swirling snow, Malik felt a strange sense of destiny, an unspoken understanding that their meeting tonight was not by chance. Malik stepped out of the abandoned shop, carrying the girl carefully in his arms. The snowstorm had grown fiercer, and each step was a battle against the biting wind that cut through his thin clothes like icy knives. His shoes were soaked, his jacket frozen stiff from the snow, but he hardly noticed. All that mattered was keeping her alive. Every shiver, every faint gasp of breath, reminded him that time was slipping away. He tightened his grip around her small body, pressing her closer to his chest, sharing whatever warmth he could muster from his own exhausted frame. The streets were eerily quiet, almost as if the city itself was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered in the blizzard, their glow dimmed by the thick curtain of falling snow. Trash and debris, frozen to the ground, crunched beneath Malik's feet. The wind whipped around corners, sending icy needles into his face, yet he pushed forward without hesitation. Each step was slow and deliberate. He knew one wrong move could mean disaster. He had seen the streets claim careless souls before, but tonight he could not falter. As Malik moved through the storm, he searched for any place that could offer shelter. Most doors were locked, windows shuttered, and the few people brave enough to walk outside hurried past without even noticing the struggling pair. It seemed as though the city itself was indifferent to the suffering that walked through its streets. Yet Malik refused to believe in indifference. He refused to give up. Somewhere, there had to be a safe place, a person who would help. He could not leave her to the snow. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Malik spotted a faint light in the distance. A small clinic, still open despite the storm, cast a warm glow onto the snow-covered pavement. Relief surged through him. It was a lifeline. He hurried forward, slipping on ice but catching himself just in time. His arms ached from holding the girl, but he gritted his teeth and refused to slow down. Every step brought them closer to safety, closer to warmth, closer to life. When he reached the clinic, Malik knocked frantically on the door. At first, there was silence, then a cautious voice asked who it was. Malik explained, his words rushed and trembling, "Please, she's freezing, she needs help, hurry." The door swung open, revealing a nurse with wide eyes. Without hesitation, she ushered them inside, shielding the girl from the storm. The warmth of the building enveloped them, and Malik felt a small sense of triumph. They were out of immediate danger, but the girl still needed care. Inside the clinic, Malik laid her gently on a cot. The nurse immediately began checking her vitals, wrapping her in thick blankets, and giving her warm water to sip. Malik watched anxiously, feeling helpless yet relieved. He had done everything he could to get her here safely, but now it was up to others to save her from the effects of the freezing night. He stayed close, talking to her softly, trying to keep her calm, murmuring words of encouragement as if his voice alone could shield her from the horrors of the storm they had just endured. As the nurse worked, Malik couldn't help but think about the strange twists of life. Here he was, a poor boy from the streets, risking everything to save a child he didn't know. She could have been anyone, another homeless child, a stranger from the wrong side of town, but something about her had drawn him in, demanded his attention, and compelled him to act. He had no idea that this small act of courage would soon lead to discoveries far beyond anything he could imagine. Time passed slowly, and the girl's breathing began to stabilize. She opened her eyes slightly, blinking against the warm light, and looked up at Malik with confusion and fear. He smiled softly at her. "It's okay, you're safe now. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." She trembled but clutched at the blankets, beginning to understand that this stranger had risked everything to protect her. That realization, even in the midst of exhaustion and cold, seemed to spark a faint glimmer of trust. As Malik sat by her side, he thought about the storm outside, the long night, and the courage it took to face it. He had always known life was hard, but tonight, he had faced a challenge that tested not just his strength, but his heart. He had acted without thinking of reward, without fear, and now he was beginning to understand that sometimes, the smallest acts of bravery could create ripples far beyond their beginnings. He didn't yet know who this girl really was, or how much her life, and his, would change because of this night, but he knew one thing for certain: he had done what was right, and nothing else mattered. Outside, the storm continued to rage, snow piling higher on the streets and rooftops, but inside the clinic, there was warmth, there was safety, and for the first time that night, there was hope. Malik's heart, tired yet determined, beat steadily as he watched over the girl he had saved, unaware that this was only the beginning of a life-changing journey for both of them. The girl lay wrapped in thick blankets, shivering slightly but slowly regaining warmth in the small, dimly lit clinic room. Malik watched her closely, his heart still pounding from the night's ordeal. The storm outside raged on, snow swirling against the windows, creating an almost ghostly blur of white. Every now and then, a gust rattled the building, reminding him that the city's harshness had not disappeared, only paused temporarily. He knew that even though she was safe for the moment, they couldn't stay here forever. She needed proper help, someone who could care for her fully, and perhaps even someone who could explain who she was. Malik stepped back, trying to think clearly. The city was large, and the streets at night were unpredictable. Some areas were empty, abandoned, or dangerous. He didn't have money for a taxi, and the snowstorm made it nearly impossible to get public transport. He considered going to the neighbors he knew, but most of them were asleep or had already gone inside to avoid the storm. Yet, Malik refused to panic. He had faced worse situations before, and he knew that if he moved carefully, he could find help. He wrapped the girl a little tighter in his coat and prepared to carry her out once again. As he stepped outside, the cold hit him like a punch. Snow had piled higher than before, and the wind seemed even sharper, slicing through his thin jacket. He held the girl close to his chest, feeling her tiny heartbeat against his own. Each step he took was slow and careful. One slip could send them both tumbling into the snow, and he could not allow that to happen. He scanned the streetlights, looking for any flicker of warmth, any open door, anything that could shelter them. After a few minutes of walking, he spotted a small convenience store still open. The lights inside flickered faintly, and through the frosted glass, he saw a person stocking shelves. Malik hurried forward, knocking on the door frantically. The man inside opened it, startled at first, then stepped back in shock as Malik explained the situation in rapid, urgent words. "Please, she's freezing, she needs blankets, food, anything to warm her up." "I found her in the snow," Malik said, his voice cracking with urgency. The storekeeper immediately sprang into action, grabbing thick blankets, hot tea, and some bread. He motioned for Malik to bring the girl inside. Malik entered carefully, setting her down on a chair while the warmth of the shop began to thaw some of the ice from her body. The girl's eyes fluttered open slightly, still confused, still scared, but she was responding. Malik poured the tea into a cup and blew on it to cool it slightly before offering it to her. She took a few small sips, shivering, but her face slowly started to regain a hint of color. The storekeeper, now understanding the gravity of the situation, offered to call a clinic that was still operating in the storm. Malik agreed immediately. While waiting, he wrapped the girl in more blankets and whispered softly to her, "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Even though she barely nodded in response, Malik could see the faintest glimmer of trust forming. In the middle of a city that often ignored the weak and helpless, Malik had become her shield, and she knew it, even if only instinctively. Soon, a small ambulance arrived, and paramedics carefully carried the girl into the vehicle. Malik followed closely, giving them every detail he could remember: where he found her, how long she had been in the snow, what condition she was in. The paramedics worked quickly, administering warmth, checking her vitals, and ensuring she would survive the harsh night. Malik's chest heaved with relief. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself a small moment of rest. He had gotten her to safety. But as the ambulance pulled away into the storm, Malik couldn't shake a feeling of anticipation. He didn't yet know who this girl was, where she came from, or why fate had placed her in his path. There was something different about her, something extraordinary hidden beneath her shivering and fragile exterior. He sensed that this night was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would change both of their lives in ways he could not yet imagine. Malik stood in the snow, watching the ambulance disappear into the white storm, and felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The city still seemed cold and indifferent around him, but he knew that for that girl, he had made a difference. For her, he had become a guardian in a world that had almost forgotten her. And though the storm raged on, Malik felt a small spark of hope. Sometimes, even in the harshest nights, courage and compassion could light the way. The girl had been resting in the warmth of the clinic for several hours. Slowly, her shivering subsided, and the pale frostiness that had stolen the color from her cheeks began to fade. Malik stayed by her side, silently watching, his hands still clutched around her small frame for reassurance. Her eyes, still wide with fear and confusion, darted around the room as if trying to understand where she was and why she was there. Malik, exhausted from the night's ordeal, felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Who was this girl? Why had she been out in the freezing snow alone? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the girl began to speak, her voice weak, almost a whisper. Who are you?" she asked, her lips trembling but her eyes cautiously studying him. Malik smiled gently, trying to ease her fear. "I'm Malik. I found you in the snow, you were freezing. You're safe now, don't worry," he said softly. She blinked, processing his words, and slowly began to trust him, if only a little. The nurse attending them noticed the girl's hesitance and asked gently, "Do you know where your home is? Who your family is?" The girl hesitated, her small hands clutching the blankets around her. She looked down at her feet, shivering, then slowly met Malik's eyes again. I don't know where I am. I think my parents are looking for me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He had saved her from the snow, but now he realized there was something much more at stake. A lost child, alone and frightened, could face dangers far greater than the cold. He squeezed her hand gently, offering quiet reassurance. "Don't worry, we'll figure this out," he said, his voice steady, though his mind raced. Suddenly, the clinic door opened, and two well-dressed adults entered, looking frantic and worried. Their eyes scanned the room, and when they saw the girl, they gasped in recognition. The girl's expression changed instantly, a mixture of relief and disbelief crossing her face. Malik noticed the adults' expensive clothing, their confident posture, and the way they looked at the girl with urgent care that went beyond simple concern. There was something different about them, something he couldn't quite place. One of the adults stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Emily! Emily! Oh my God, we found you," she cried, wrapping the girl in her arms. The girl's eyes widened, her small hands clutching at the woman's coat. Malik watched in amazement as the scene unfolded. Emily, this was her name, was not just any lost child, she was the missing daughter of a wealthy, prominent family. The news had been all over the city in recent weeks, and now he realized the full magnitude of what had happened. The father stepped forward, his eyes filled with gratitude as he turned toward Malik. You saved her life," he said, his voice shaking. Malik felt a rush of disbelief. He had done what any person with a heart would do, and yet now he was being praised, recognized, almost revered. The weight of the night's struggle, the snow, the danger, all of it seemed surreal as he watched Emily cling to her parents, safe at last. Emily looked at Malik with wide eyes, a mixture of awe and gratitude. You saved me," she whispered, her voice stronger now. Malik nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "I just couldn't leave you out there, you were freezing." "I had to help," he said simply. It was a modest explanation for an extraordinary act. He didn't expect reward, fame, or recognition. He had acted purely out of instinct, out of compassion. The parents insisted Malik sit with them, offering him food and warmth while the staff made sure Emily was fully recovered. Malik hesitated at first, unused to such attention and generosity, but he eventually accepted. As he sat there, sipping the warm tea they offered, he couldn't help but marvel at the turn of events. One moment, he had been trudging through a storm with a shivering girl in his arms. The next, he was sitting in the home of a billionaire family, their lost daughter safe because of him. Even as the night wore on and the snowstorm continued outside, Malik realized something profound. Life was unpredictable. Fate could place two people from completely different worlds in the same moment, and one small act of kindness could change everything. Emily's story was extraordinary, yes, but so was his courage, his quick thinking, and his refusal to abandon her in the cold. He had saved her life, and in doing so, had become a part of a story that no one would ever forget. And as Malik watched Emily reunited with her family, he understood something even deeper. Sometimes, heroes are ordinary people who make extraordinary choices, and the impact of a single courageous act can ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. The story of that freezing night did not stay a secret for long. By the morning, whispers had turned into headlines, and the quiet streets of the city were buzzing with news about the boy who had saved the missing billionaire daughter. Malik's small act of courage, an act that he had considered normal, human, and necessary, had captured the imagination of an entire city. People were amazed that a poor boy, with nothing but determination and heart, had rescued a girl in the middle of a storm when even adults hesitated to step outside. News outlets began to cover the story in every possible way. Videos of Malik carrying the shivering girl were shared across social media, showing his soaked coat, frozen shoes, and the raw care he had shown in that desperate night. Comments poured in from every corner of the internet, admiration, awe, and gratitude. Strangers called him a hero, a guardian angel, and a reminder that goodness still existed in the world. Malik, who had spent his life unnoticed and struggling to survive, found himself suddenly at the center of attention. At school and in his neighborhood, people who had barely paid attention to him before now stopped to ask about the girl, to congratulate him, and to shake his hand. Some journalists even sought interviews, curious about his life, his thoughts, and what had driven him to act so bravely in such dangerous conditions. Malik, however, remained humble. He didn't boast or exaggerate. When asked why he had helped, he simply said, "She was alone and cold. I couldn't leave her there," words so simple, yet they resonated with people around the world. Meanwhile, Emily's family, deeply grateful, ensured that Malik's heroism was recognized formally. They invited him to their mansion, offering thanks, gifts, and even scholarships for education. Malik felt overwhelmed. He had grown up in poverty, used to struggling day by day, never imagining that someone like him could be appreciated in such a grand way. Yet, he realized that recognition was not what mattered most. What mattered was knowing he had saved a life. The media coverage also brought a wider perspective. People began to share their own acts of kindness, inspired by Malik's courage. The city seemed to shift, if only slightly, as strangers checked on neighbors, helped the homeless, and offered assistance to those in need. Malik had not only saved Emily, he had sparked a movement of compassion, proving that a single brave act could inspire countless others. Malik's story was unique not just because of the social status of the girl he saved, but because it demonstrated the contrast between worlds. Here was a boy living in poverty, risking his life in freezing streets, whose courage and humanity transcended his circumstances. And there was a girl, wealthy, privileged, but in that moment, vulnerable and alone, dependent entirely on his instinctive kindness. The narrative struck a chord. Heroism isn't defined by wealth, status, or power, it is defined by action when it matters most. News anchors described Malik as the boy who turned a winter night of tragedy into a story of hope. Social media hashtags like #HeroBoy, #CourageInTheSnow, and #FaithInHumanity trended across platforms. Stories of Malik's life and struggles were shared alongside videos and images of him saving Emily, creating a narrative of resilience and bravery that inspired thousands. Even the mayor of the city took notice, praising Malik in a public statement for his quick thinking, selflessness, and bravery under extreme conditions. Despite all the attention, Malik remained grounded. He visited Emily in the hospital when he could, bringing small gifts he had bought with the few coins he had. He laughed quietly with her, sharing stories of his neighborhood, and listening to tales of her life in luxury. It was a world he had never known, yet he felt no envy. Instead, he marveled at the strange turn of fate that had brought them together and allowed him to make such a significant difference. For Malik, the recognition was a reminder that small acts of courage could carry immense weight. What had started as a desperate effort to save a girl from the snowstorm had transformed his life and the lives of those around him. He realized that heroism was not about glory, it was about making choices when it matters most, even if no one is watching. And now, the world was watching, and they were learning what Malik already knew: kindness, courage, and selflessness have a power far greater than money, fame, or privilege. Malik had never imagined that his life could change so dramatically in just one night. One moment, he was trudging through freezing snow, his shoes soaked and his hands numb, carrying a shivering girl he barely knew. The next, he was sitting in a warm, luxurious room, surrounded by people who wanted to give him a future he had only dreamed about in passing moments of hope. The parents of the girl he had saved, Emily, were insistent. They wanted him to have opportunities he had never had, a chance to step out of poverty and into a life where his courage could take him further than the streets ever could. Malik, Emily's mother said softly, her eyes glistening with gratitude, "We can never repay you for what you did for our daughter. But we want to make sure your bravery and kindness are rewarded. We want to help you with your education, your future, anything you need." Malik looked around the room, unsure how to respond. He was not used to offers like this, to people treating him as more than just another boy from a tough neighborhood. He felt awkward and overwhelmed, but also a deep sense of pride. Emily's father joined in, his voice firm but kind. "You risked your life for her, Malik. That shows courage, responsibility, and character. We want to give you a chance to achieve more than what your circumstances have allowed. Education, training, guidance, we will provide it all. You've earned it, and we mean every word." Malik's mind raced. He had always wanted to learn more, to explore a world beyond his neighborhood, but resources were scarce, and opportunities were limited. Now, it seemed the universe itself had intervened, offering him a second chance at life. The first step was education. The family arranged for Malik to attend a school that could nurture his potential. The thought of classrooms filled with books, computers, and teachers who encouraged him rather than overlooked him felt surreal. He had spent much of his childhood running errands, working odd jobs, and surviving, but now he could dream of studying subjects he had only glimpsed in old library books or on borrowed tablets. Malik felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that stepping into this new world would challenge him in ways he had never faced before. Beyond education, Emily's family also offered mentorship and guidance. They connected him with people who had succeeded despite humble beginnings, people who could teach him how to navigate a world so different from the one he had known. Malik listened intently during these sessions, absorbing advice about life, opportunity, and responsibility. He understood that he couldn't take shortcuts. Success in this new environment would require hard work, dedication, and perseverance. But he also realized that with the foundation he had built through courage and resilience, he was already ahead in ways others could never understand. Yet, amidst the luxury and attention, Malik remained grounded. He never forgot the streets he had grown up on, the frozen nights, the hunger, or the struggle to survive. He carried those experiences with him like a compass, reminding him of the value of humility, empathy, and gratitude. He understood that wealth and opportunity were powerful tools, but they were meaningless without character, courage, and heart. Emily's family recognized this as well, encouraging him to remain true to himself, to use his advantages, not to forget his roots, but to help others who still struggled like he once had. As the days passed, Malik grew more comfortable in his new surroundings, yet he never lost the quiet determination that had carried him through the storm. He spent hours reading, learning, and planning for a future that once felt impossible. He also spent time with Emily, their bond growing stronger with each conversation, each shared laugh, and each story of their very different lives. They had met under extraordinary circumstances, and their friendship became a symbol of how kindness and bravery could transcend wealth, social status, and every barrier between them. By the end of the first week, Malik understood something profound. This opportunity was not just a reward, it was a responsibility. He had been given the chance to change his life, and possibly the lives of others, because he had acted with courage when it mattered most. And though he had started as a boy walking through a frozen city, carrying a fragile life in his arms, he was now stepping into a world where his potential could finally be realized, a world where his heart and bravery would continue to guide him. Malik had saved Emily, but in doing so, he had also saved himself, from the limits of poverty, the cold of the streets, and the invisibility he had always felt. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where opportunity met courage, and where a boy who had once been lost in the snow could now become a beacon of hope, inspiration, and transformation. Malik never imagined that one cold night in the city streets would change his life forever. He had carried Emily through a snowstorm, risking his own safety to keep her alive, and in doing so, he had stepped into a world he had only seen from a distance, a world of wealth, opportunity, and comfort that seemed almost like a dream. Yet, even amidst the luxury and attention, Malik remained the same boy who had refused to leave a shivering child alone in the snow. He understood that true courage and kindness were measured not by status or wealth, but by action when it mattered most. In the weeks that followed, Malik's life began to transform. He attended school with resources he had never imagined, learning subjects that had once seemed impossible to grasp. He met mentors who guided him, sharing lessons not only about education, but about life, integrity, and responsibility. Each day brought new challenges, yet Malik approached them with the same determination and resilience that had carried him through the freezing streets that fateful night. He realized that opportunity was only as valuable as the effort put into it, and he was ready to give everything he had. Despite the sudden change in his circumstances, Malik never forgot his roots. He remembered the harsh winters, the hungry nights, and the struggles of his community. He often thought about the children and families still living in poverty, still facing challenges he had once known all too well. And so, he made a quiet promise to himself: the kindness he had shown Emily, and the courage that had led him to save her, would not end with him alone. He would use his new opportunities to make a difference, to help others who were still struggling, to show them that compassion could exist even in a harsh and unforgiving world. Emily, meanwhile, had fully recovered, and the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet understanding. Their connection went beyond friendship. It was a testament to the extraordinary way fate had brought them together. Emily, once lost and vulnerable, now trusted Malik completely, knowing that his bravery had saved her life and changed her perspective on the world. For her, Malik was not just a hero, he was a reminder that humanity and compassion could exist even in the most unexpected places. The city, too, seemed to feel the ripple of their story. Malik's heroism had inspired countless others. People spoke of him as a symbol of hope, courage, and selflessness. Social media and news outlets continued to share his story, reminding the world that even in difficult times, acts of bravery and kindness could shine brighter than wealth or power. Malik had become a living example of the truth that wealth does not define a person's worth, character, courage, and heart do. As months passed, Malik grew into a young man with confidence, knowledge, and compassion. He pursued education with vigor, explored opportunities that had once seemed out of reach, and never shied away from helping others. He understood that the life-changing offer he had received was not just a gift, but a responsibility, to honor the act of kindness that had brought him here, to continue that cycle of generosity and courage. And yet, despite all the attention, all the praise, and all the wealth surrounding him now, Malik remained humble. He walked the fine line between two worlds, the streets he had grown up on and the opportunities he now had, and he carried both with him. The lessons from the snowstorm, the fear and determination, the courage to act when it mattered most, they stayed with him, guiding him in every decision he made. One evening, as Malik and Emily watched the sun set over the city from the balcony of her family's home, he reflected on how strange and beautiful life could be. The snowstorm that had once seemed cruel and unforgiving had become the catalyst for change, connection, and hope. He realized that kindness transcended wealth, that one small act could alter destinies, and that courage often appears in the most ordinary people at the most extraordinary moments. Malik had saved Emily, yes, but in saving her, he had saved himself as well, from a life of limitation, from invisibility, and from despair. Together, they had proven that bravery and compassion could cross every boundary, that one moment of humanity could create ripples that touched countless lives. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Malik understood that some stories are never just about the people in them, they are about the hope, courage, and goodness they inspire in the world.